welcome to Just One More Watch. With an intro like that and dressed like this, you know what's coming, don't you? I just bought one of two watches. Either a 25,000 Aussie dollar vintage Rolex GMT or a 400 Aussie dollar Momentum Sea Quartz. Which do you think it is? I'll give you a minute to think about it. Yes, you're right, I bought the Momentum Sea Quartz. Magnum may be more famous for wearing the Rolex, but he actually wore a different watch for the first 3 seasons. That watch being the Chronosport Sea Quartz 30, and the Sea Quartz design has now been reissued by a Canadian-based company called Momentum, owned by the same people that used to own Chronosport. I believe this is their second or third batch of these, and it's done rather well. This one popped up on my Instagram feed about 4 months ago, I think, and I pre-ordered one. Now, full disclosure, this is the second Sea Quartz that has arrived in Sydney. The first one had crown stem issues. The crown pretty much fell straight out when I tried to adjust it, but the company were very good. They sent me a replacement and it arrived in less than a week. With that being said, let's flip the camera and have a look at it. Okay, let's begin with the packaging, which seems an appropriate place to start because that's where you will be starting if you pick one of these up for yourself. Standard, small, neat black cardboard box with the company sticker on top. Unspectacular, but then again, it isn't going to take up too much space in your cupboard. The watch actually sits sideways, attached to a rather large, rather firm cushion type piece. And there is my Sea Quartz 30 on the bracelet. There are plenty of spare bracelet links for the big guys, by the way, and a 2-year warranty, which you don't always get with Quartz. 1 year is more normal, so good on them for that. Now, most of the footage that you'll see today features the watch on the Jubilee bracelet. That's what I initially ordered it on, and I suspect most people will order the bracelet. However, I found myself wearing it not on the Jubilee, but on a Tropic strap. Not only is the Tropic strap more Magnum correct, if you are a super fan of the show, Tom wore his on a black Tropic, it's also really comfortable. Now, either black or orange FKM rubber, so no breaking in required and no fluff. The orange picks out the orange minute hand nicely as well. Plus, I think the bracelet, or specifically the clasp, is a bit too large and chunky. More on that later. Anyway, here are some pretty pictures of the watch back on the bracelet for you. I think it's a good looking piece, this one. Clearly they have chosen to use an old radium style lume on the hands and the dial, so it has that photina'd look. Now, the original watch launched back in 1977, so that is not inappropriate. But they could have gone either way here, I suppose. If they had used white lume, it would have looked more modern. As it stands, it does look quite retro. Perhaps at some point they will offer a choice. It seems this model is proving very popular, and I'm sure they will already be thinking about ways of capitalising on that popularity. Alright, let's have a look at dimensions and specifications then. And this is a watch that wears smaller than the dimensions suggest. Now, they call it a 42, I measure it at 41.5 across the case, but the bezel, as you see from this top-down shot, sits inboard of the case with a diameter of 39.5. So the watch both looks and feels a bit smaller than your typical 42, because it is. Thickness I measure at 10.9. Again, that is slim because it's quartz and not automatic. Under 11 is still really good regardless for 300 meters of water resistance. It's a nicely wearable 47mm from lug tip to lug tip, and it's a 20mm gap between the lugs. I'll give you 2 weights today, 97 on the Tropic and 147 on the Jubilee. The Jubilee does taper from 20 to 18, but it's a chunky clasp, taking that back up to nearly 21. The crystal is flat sapphire, water resistance is 300 meters as noted, and the movement is a Swiss Quartz Ronda R507. You can't see the Ronda though, which is probably just as well. You get this high polished screw-on stainless steel case back instead, with plenty of information on it. Now, this is not an old watch, and already the case back looks decidedly second-hand just from letting it rest on the bracelet. They apparently offer an engraving service, but your chosen epistle will also look rather second-hand rather quickly, I suspect, so maybe don't bother with that. Now, I can't find specific stats on the R507, but I'm guessing roughly 3 years of battery and roughly plus or minus 15 seconds per month accuracy. Standard quartz fare then. The case finish is pretty simple: high polished sides, circular brush to the upper lugs and crown guards, and a high polished chamfer connecting the two areas. It's also a high polish bezel. Now that might sound like a lot of high polish surfaces for a dive watch, but on wrist it still all looks fairly discreet. The 5.5mm crown is indeed well guarded. Like I said, I had an issue with the first one, but no problems with this one. Now the bezel may be polished, but it still provides reasonable grip, 120 click unidirectional, everything lines up as it should, and the insert is sapphire, which is a really nice touch. The bezel actually sits proud of the main crystal, so you're less likely to scratch or shatter the glass, but more likely to scratch or shatter your bezel insert instead. The Jubilee is nice enough, but then again, I like Jubilees. Just push pins holding it all together, but that's fine for the price. Standard brushed outer links, high polished 3 center links. But it's a bit of a chunky clasp. All brushed, 6 holes of micro adjust, pressed upper milled scissor, security fold over and double triggers, but it's a bit agricultural. It takes quite a lot of effort both to open it and to close it. Let's check out the dial and hands again before we get it on wrist. Just like the original watch, this one has a day-date complication at the 3 o'clock, colour matched black to match the dial. I do like a day-date personally for the extra practicality it offers. The dial is just printed again like the original, with large Arabics at the 12, 6 and 9 and fairly large tapering rectangles on all of the other hour marks. The Momentum logo and brand name are printed above the pinion, and C Quartz 30, the model name, beneath the pinion. Beyond the indices are printed minute markers in white, with every 5th one being thicker than the others. Now there is an unmarked angled stainless steel brushed chapter ring at the edge of the dial. I guess that also makes the watch look slightly smaller because the dial is therefore slightly smaller to accommodate it. The bezel insert is fully graded with numerals at the 10s and a triangle at the 60/0. Only the numerals and triangle are loomed though, you'll see that in just a second. And then there's the hands. Again carried over from the original, which was a proper diving tool, hence the obvious focus on the minute hand at the expense of the hour hand. Now Momentum aren't the only company to have resurrected this design, but they have chosen to stay faithful to the original watch rather than, shall we say, rebalance the handset. Some will appreciate this, while others I'm sure would have been okay with a slightly more prominent hour hand. What do you reckon? Leave me a comment, let me know. On wrist, and I will bring the Tropics back in at this point as well, because like I said, that's how I have been wearing this one. The case doesn't curve, the lugs point down slightly, but at less than 11mm thick it still fits well on either bracelet or on Tropic. It's a really nice Tropic, by the way. One other reason why I have gravitated towards it. Now I have got a 7-inch wrist for your reference. This watch fits me nicely, but it both looks and feels like a smaller watch than it is. I don't consider that to be a bad thing though, but if you're coming from a Willard or a Turtle or another 70s style diver with a bigger cushion case, this one is going to wear smaller than that for sure. One thing you'll notice from these wrist rolls is that because they've used flat sapphire, you do get bounce back depending on the angle. I don't think there's much AR undercoating here, therefore. Both Tropics definitely make a case for themselves, black for everyday wear or orange for occasional/holiday wear, or everyday wear if you just love orange. And we will finish as usual with a couple of pocket shots. Just under 150 grams is where you would expect this style of watch to be on a full bracelet. The fully guarded crown also helps with on-wrist comfort if you are going to wear yours loose on the bracelet, or take a third of that weight off if you opt for the FKM Tropic. Alright, moans and niggles, let's dish the dirt. You haven't seen the lume yet, and that's because it's nothing more than okay really. Now it looks great initially, it has that old radium look evident from the colour of the printing on the dial. However, when I turn the speed up, you can see that the bezel goes first, followed by the indices not all that long after. The hands are still there at the end of the test, but yeah, like I said, okay at best. And the hour hand is a funny little thing, isn't it? It does look like a 1-for-1 carryover from the original, but maybe they could just have broadened it or lengthened it slightly to give the handset a more balanced look overall. And I know that some of you will have been screaming at your chosen devices because the second hand doesn't hit the markers. I'll be honest, it doesn't bother me, but I know it does bother some people, which is why it's in this section. High polish case back, we've looked at it already. This is what mine looked like after only a couple of days, to be honest. Brushed is definitely best when it comes to tool watch case backs. And the Jubilee, normally I would love this thing on the Jubilee. It's the right style of bracelet for this style of watch, but I feel it's a bit too chunky and I think the clasp is to blame. It feels very agricultural in use and it makes the watch feel slightly overly braceleted as a consequence of its size. Perhaps I'll play around fitting something smaller and slimmer, or perhaps I'll just stick with the Tropic. And finally, the price. Now I had to double check this. I read that they initially offered these at $195 USD. I paid $236 USD plus 40 shipping for the braceleted version when I ordered it earlier this year. That has now gone up to $295 USD on the bracelet, $259 if you go for one of the Tropics. That's 25% more than I paid, and that's a fair old leap, isn't it? At $240, it was a no-brainer for me when I saw this one. At $295, you're going to have to think 25% harder if it still offers good value for money. But overall, I still really like it and I didn't mind waiting a few months for it. I'm happy I bought it and it's a watch that I can see myself keeping. Or should I say, it has as good a chance as anything of hanging on to a slot in my watch box in the revolving door that is my personal watch collection. So there you have it. If you want to play 1980s Hawaiian private investigator, and why wouldn't you, but you don't have the budget for a Rolex, perhaps this sea quartz will scratch that particular itch. To be honest though, the Magnum thing may have tipped me over the edge, but I bought it because it was a well-priced and cool-looking watch, and I'm properly into quartz at the moment if I'm buying for me. They'll need to be careful though that they don't keep jacking the price up so as to end up making this one unappealing. If you want a quartz diver but don't fancy this quartz diver, check out either of these two quartz divers. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. I'll see you in a future one.